Right, so Simon is a postgraduate researcher with the business school at Southampton University. His research is focused on the business management of railway engineering, and as you can see from the slide, high-speed rail. He's actually he works for Network Rail as a project engineer on switches and crossings. And and he's also a published author, writing on my favourite railway company, the IHR. And I was actually gifted his book for Christmas. So
I'll have to sign it.
Yes. So Simon, over to you.
Thank you, David. And thank you for the plug. Right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to lie, I'm very nervous. And the reason I'm very nervous is because this PhD has taught me more than anything that I know absolutely nothing about the history of railways. Despite being a published author, despite having worked for the...
Don't you just love history? History? You do love history. Technology. Anyway, so over to you.
So as I was saying, I know nothing. No, in all seriousness, when you start researching this and you start going through the archives and you find all of these interesting documents, all of this huge amount of information is actually out there, you have loads of preconceptions that get completely blown out of the water, loads of theories that you have that are just wrong. So I think going through this presentation, if you've got a lot of preconceptions about what high-speed rail is, I would just put them to one side and have a think, because I might be getting a lot of questions later, and certainly I have many of my own. So, as David very kindly introduced me, I will skip over this, other than to say that I'm also the treasurer of the Merchant Navy Locomotive Preservation Society, and that is our locomotive clan line that I'm standing next to there. So, quick look at the contents. What is high-speed rail? What we think is the relative nature of high-speed rail, its hybridity and its relativity. I'll have a quick look at railways through the ages. We'll then have another look at streamlining, and then high-speed railways as a system, which might surprise you how early we were developing it. So, what is high-speed rail? Well, my observation would be that it is a system, and that system consists of infrastructure, stations, rolling stock operations, maintenance and maintenance facilities, financing, marketing, and almost every department you can think of within a railway company. It is also about capacity, and a new high-speed railway line can add capacity to existing networks, it can provide alternative routes for existing stock on specific sections, and it offers alternative to other modes of transport, which we can see very clearly in, for example, Japan, where the modal share between aircraft and the train is very stark. High-speed rail virtually wiped out, within a few decades, the intercity air fleet in Japan. These days, it's a bit more governmental-led, and you actually can't fly in so much as you can get the train. They actually created bills and passed laws in which you really do have to get the train from one end of Japan to the other. It's a sort of a protecting of the railway companies. But the third thing that I want to really make clear, it is different everywhere. There are different interpretations of what high-speed rail is across the world and how we look at it. And I think I should point out at this stage that the country that is actually leading high-speed rail at the minute is China, and that's purely in mileage terms. In 2008 they had a couple of thousand miles of track. Well, that is now well over 20,000 miles and building. So the relative nature of high-speed rail. Now, the International Union of Railways has identified 3 categories of high-speed rail. You may or may not agree with this. I, for the most part, agree, but this is their definition. So category 1 A high-speed rail system is for high-speed trains only. These are new tracks that are specially constructed, allowing a maximum running speed of at least 155 miles an hour. And I apologise to everyone in the audience. You first. I'm going to be speaking in old money for the most part and not in kilometres per hour, although you will notice that throughout the slides. Categories 2 and 3 are more mixed traffic, and that's where we actually find a lot of interest. Because category 2, for example, is existing tracks that are upgraded for high speeds, up to and over 124 miles per hour. But in category 3, there are existing tracks that are specially upgraded for high speeds, allowing a maximum running speed of at least 124 miles an hour, but some sections having a lower allowable speed, so for example due to topographic constraints or passage through urban areas. And this is high-speed rail as defined by different countries today. In China, surprisingly, it's quite a low speed of 124. Japan is 125 miles per hour. It's the same for Great Britain. And in the United States of America, where their fastest train is the Acela, which runs at a top speed of 150 miles an hour, they define high-speed rail as being 155. And of course, if you look at France, they define it very differently, and they say that high speed is only at 200 miles an hour and above. So, hybridity and relativity. Because this is a historical PhD, I've been looking backwards at what has been going on around the world in terms of high-speed rail. And one of the things that is really clear to me is that high-speed rail hasn't developed in a vacuum. It's not something that stood alone for many years. It's actually had to develop through mixed traffic railways. And most railways, as you know, share their capacity between passenger and freight services. And that capacity to run a hybrid railway incorporating high-speed services depends greatly on scheduling and infrastructure. And that infrastructure is relative to your track, or number of tracks, and your signalling systems and braking systems and all that sort of thing. And in the present day, we know that diesel and electric trains have accelerated schedules far above the steam era. An emerging issue that we have today is in fact the physical length of freight trains. Moving on to relative high speed, running the fastest service is not always about top speed. And my supervisor, who is well known as a Great Western man, will be pleased to note that for some years the Cheltenham Flyer was the fastest regular service in the world with an average speed of 71.4 miles per hour. I think I've just outed him. The Great Western Railway also introduced to the UK express diesel services to the United Kingdom based on the developments in Germany. Now, I want to press something here. Speed records are virtually meaningless, but I've included them here to give an idea of how the technology develops. And if anyone mentions the word City of Truro in the questions, I will not be answering that. So, steam. Henley Darren, 15 miles an hour, up to Rocket in 1829, 30 miles per hour. The Stirling single was just about authenticated at 85 miles per hour. And of course we know that Mallard was registered, albeit on the plaques and not necessarily on the dynamometer roll, at 126 miles an hour. When you look at diesel trains, we know that the Intercity 125 in the 1970s and 80s was capable of 125 miles per hour. But how relevant is that when Siemens did 126 miles an hour in 1903? You'll notice that the bullet train was not actually that much faster at 130 miles an hour in the 1960s. So there is an argument, and I think it's quite salient, that for the steam era, we capped around about 90 to 100 miles an hour for a very long time, and then the exceptions to that rule, which are the record breakers, are not indicative of high-speed services, whereas with diesel and electric, they continue to develop. The Chuo Maglev blows that out of the water with a top speed of 314 miles per hour. And when that goes into service, hopefully by about 2030 in Japan, it will be the fastest everyday service in the world. But it is not conventional wheeled rail, so therefore I won't be covering it. And now, one of my favourite bits of the research, streamlining. We get to talk about the influences from other parts of the world, such as the aero industry. I'll ask you a quick question for the audience in the room. How many of these do you think were designed in a wind tunnel? Anyone like to venture a guess? Go on, David.
A4.
A4, yeah, that's one. What do you think of the rest of them? Go on, Kevin, give us a guess.
Maybe, well, the coronation in Scottish is cladding, wasn't it? Maybe the German one as well? I don't know, shit.
So the answer is all of them. Every single one of these was designed in a wind tunnel. But the first steam locomotive, the first vehicle that I can work out that was physically designed by wind tunnel testing was Gresley's W1 in 1926, emerging in 1929. And that's as far back as I can go, where there's actual physical evidence of wind tunnel testing to kind of change the shape of a train. I think, though, it would be wrong to say that there aren't earlier streamlined vehicles. For instance, the wind cutter trains of around the 1900s. But is there a difference between industrial design and streamlining and fluid dynamics? These are all questions I need to answer, by the way. If anyone has an answer for me, I'd love to hear it. But these are more important, I would say, in the development of high-speed rail. The Fliegende Hamburger, otherwise known as the Flying Hamburger, and the Great Western Rail, high-speed rail car, actually have a lot in common, in so much that the Great Western Railway copied the basic layout of the Hamburger and put it into a single car. They later went on to develop a two-car unit, but we'll skip over that for now. And the Comet from the United States of America in 1935 shows very similar design. The train of thinking, if you'll pardon the pun, from all of these railway companies was, well, let's look at what the aero industry is doing. Let's look at how they design aircraft. And nowhere is that more apparent than in Shinkansen Zero in the 1960s, which is literally a cockpit from an aircraft stuck onto the front of a train. Now, it's not quite as simple as that, but that was their starting point. They looked at airliners before they built the train. So what is high-speed rail as a system? Well, in 2024, we're developing new forms of in-cab signalling, magnetic braking. We're looking at new forms of OLE, OHLE, which is overhead line electrification. There are new forms of slab track and welded rail, and we have new high-speed railway couplings. But if we look at it going back, quite a lot of these things are actually being developed far earlier than you would think. On the previous page, in fact I'll go back to the previous page, the Scharfenberg coupler, top right, was designed in 1903 and in use on German, Swiss and French railways for some time. This particular one, the 61001, is the Henschel-Wegmann train of 1935 that had Scharfenberg couplers. On the left you'll see Westinghouse. Well, it's not magnetic braking in any sense of the word, but railway companies and the contractors that were working for them were thinking about how can we stop trains more quickly when they're going more quickly. So quick-acting brakes for Westinghouse were used on the Coronation train that you can see in the photograph is behind Mallard. That was part of its braking test for its speed run. The bottom left shows the HUD in-cab signalling device. Are there any railway enthusiasts in the room? Anyone want to guess what this became?
AWS.
Points to the man in the corner. Yes, AWS or ATC. It's the same system whether you call it automatic train control or the automatic warning system. In this case, it's on a King Arthur class locomotive on the Southern Railway being tested in the late 1920s. Continuously welded rail, well, we were working on that in the 1930s with the London, Midland and Scottish Railway. Not in the lengths that we see today, but nevertheless this was the way forward. And of course, in 1903, Siemens' three-phase electric high-speed train showed the world what it could do. 126 miles an hour on an electric train in 1903. Put this into perspective, that's 35 years. Yeah, 35 years before Mallard. Does Mallard's record actually matter? I might upset the other LDR enthusiast in the room. I do have a literature review, I do have a larger bibliography. I just wanted to put a few things in there to kind of give you an idea of what I've been looking at, and if anyone requests it, I will provide it. I'd just like to thank a few people, including Dr. Ed Turner and Kevin in the corner, and of course Dr. Roy Edwards, who was my supervisor, and in particular my mother-in-law, Professor Nuha Al-Sharafa, who pestered me for years to go and do a PhD, and now I'm doing one. So all that remains is to say thank you for listening, and are there any questions? Oh, we're taking those at the end, yes. So thank you.